My sister called me an embarrassment and banned me from her royal wedding. She thought hiding a blue-collar worker like me would secure her place in the palace. So, I stayed home. But 3 hours into the ceremony, the ground outside my small apartment began to shake. I opened my door to find 2 armored royal vehicles and 6 elite royal guards standing at attention. Their commander didn't look at me with disgust. He bowed. His Majesty requests your presence, immediately. My sister thought she was marrying into the most powerful bloodline in Europe, but what she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly guess, was that the king had been searching for me for 5 years, and it wasn't because I was a stain on her new life. It was because I was the only person alive who could save his. Follow my story until the end to see her face drop. My name is Paige. I'm 27 years old, and if you saw me on a normal day, you'd probably find me covered in grease, holding a wrench, and buried under the hood of a 10-ton military transport truck. I work as a heavy machinery mechanic and serve in the military reserves. It's hard, honest work, and I've always been proud of the uniform I wear. But to my family, especially my sister Daphne, my lifestyle was a disease. Daphne was the golden child, obsessed with high society, designer labels, and social climbing. When she managed to capture the attention of Prince Julian of Denmark, our family treated her like royalty before she even wore a crown. Then came the wedding invitations. Or rather, everyone's invitation except mine. 2 weeks before the ceremony, Daphne came to my apartment. She didn't even step inside, terrified she'd get oil on her pristine white coat. "You're an embarrassment, Paige," she told me coldly, her eyes scanning my work clothes with pure disgust. "You don't fit into our new life. I can't have a greasy mechanic ruining my standing with the royal family. So, you're staying home." My own mother nodded in agreement behind her. I was banned from my only sister's wedding just to protect her fragile social ego. Before I tell you how the king himself blew up her perfect day, I want to know about you. Comment the city you are watching from right now so I can see how far my story has reached. Have you ever been excluded by your own family? Let me know below. The morning of the wedding arrived, and while the cathedral downtown was buzzing with international media, global dignitaries, and the rest of my family dressed in silk and velvet, I did exactly what I was told to do. I stayed home. I pulled on my old overalls, went down to my garage, and spent the morning overhauling the transmission of a broken-down engine. It was my way of blocking out the sting of rejection. Exactly 3 hours into the ceremony, just as the reception was supposed to be starting at the Grand Palace, the quiet of my neighborhood was shattered. The ground outside my small apartment began to shake with the deep rumble of high-performance engines. I wiped the grease from my hands, walked to the window, and caught my breath. 2 massive armored royal SUVs, sporting blacked-out windows and the official royal seal, completely blocked off my narrow street. Before I could even process what was happening, my front door rattled under a heavy, authoritative knock. I opened it to find 6 elite royal guards standing at absolute attention on my porch, their dress uniforms pristine, and their chests decorated with combat medals. Standing at the front was a high-ranking commander. I expected confusion or hostility, but instead, the commander took off his cap and bowed deeply to me. "Ma'am," he said, his voice echoing down the hallway. "His Majesty King Frederick has abruptly halted the wedding reception. He looked at the guest registry, realized you were absent, and requests your presence immediately. Please, come with us." As the armored SUV tore down the highway toward the royal palace, my mind raced back to a time before I was a mechanic in a quiet garage. 5 years ago, I was on active military deployment in a volatile desert region overseas. It was a classified joint operations mission, a night I would never forget. Our convoy was ambushed, caught in a crossfire that disabled our primary vehicles. Amidst the smoke and chaos, I found a high-ranking foreign diplomat trapped inside a severely damaged armored transport. The engine was dead, the electronics fried, and enemy forces were closing in fast. With bullets denting the plating around us, my training took over. I pulled open the crumpled hood, tore away the ruptured fuel lines, and manually bypassed the ignition system using nothing but my pocket knife and a spare wire. I hot-wired that heavy machine in under 2 minutes. I took the wheel and drove us through the desert until we hit a secure zone. The man I rescued was whisked away by elite security forces before the dust could even settle. I was told the operation was highly classified, and I never learned his true identity. I received a quiet commendation, went back to my mechanical work, and eventually transitioned into the reserves. Now, watching the city's skyline blur past the window, the puzzle pieces finally crashed together in my head. The diplomat I had saved 5 years ago wasn't just a high-ranking politician, he was King Frederick himself. And he had finally found me. The massive iron gates of the Grand Palace swung open, and the armored SUV pulled right up to the red carpet at the main entrance. The royal guards quickly opened my door, and I stepped out, instantly feeling the weight of 1,000 eyes on me. I hadn't been given time to change. I was still wearing my faded work overalls, my sturdy leather boots, and there was probably still a faint smudge of engine grease near my hairline. The guards marched me directly through the towering gold doors and straight into the Grand Palace reception hall. The room was a breathtaking sea of glittering crystal chandeliers, expensive silk ball gowns, and immaculate tailored tuxedos. The music suddenly stopped, and a collective gasp echoed across the marble floor as a heavy grease monkey walked into high society. Daphne spotted me from across the room, standing beside Prince Julian with a glass of champagne in her hand. Her face instantly flushed with a mixture of pure panic and intense rage. She dropped her glass onto a waiter's tray, grabbed our mother by the arm, and practically marched over to intercept me before I could take another step. "What are you doing here?" Daphne hissed under her breath, her eyes darting around frantically to see if the photographers were watching. "You are ruining my big day. I told you that you were a social embarrassment, and you still showed up to humiliate me?" Our mother glared at me too, demanding that I turn around. Daphne looked at the nearest palace security guard, raised her voice, and loudly demanded that they throw me out immediately. Before the palace security guards could even step toward me, a booming voice echoed across the silent reception hall. "Stand down!" King Frederick himself stepped away from the royal dais and walked down the marble steps. The entire room went dead silent, bowing as he approached. Daphne instantly shifted her expression, flashing a sweet smile, assuming the king was coming over to help her throw me out of the palace. "Your Majesty," Daphne said smoothly, tilting her head, "I am so sorry for this disruption. My sister here is quite unrefined and clearly snuck into the palace to cause a scene. Security is removing her now." The king stopped right in front of us, but he didn't look at Daphne. His eyes were fixed entirely on me, filled with deep respect and emotion. "She didn't sneak in," King Frederick said, his voice cutting through the room like iron. "I sent my personal guard to fetch her." He turned sharply to face Daphne and Prince Julian. "You call this woman an unrefined embarrassment? 5 years ago, during a classified ambush overseas, this brave soldier risked her life under heavy fire to single-handedly save mine. While you were planning designer parties, your sister was defending nations." The king looked out at the stunned crowd of global dignitaries. "My gratitude, my respect, and my life belong to Paige. If she is an embarrassment to your new life, Daphne, then it is your new life that has no place in this palace." Daphne's jaw dropped, and the color drained completely from her face as the entire room stared at her in utter disgust. She tried to stammer out an apology, but King Frederick held up a single hand, silencing her instantly. He looked over at the royal council members standing by the dais and gave a sharp, decisive nod. A family built on vanity, cruelty, and the betrayal of its own blood has no right to the wealth of this kingdom, the king announced, his voice echoing off the high gold ceilings. He revealed to the stunned crowd that because Daphne had proven herself entirely devoid of honor and basic human decency, the royal family's vast financial assets would be permanently restricted from her. Prince Julian looked on in absolute horror as the king explained that the royal prenuptial agreement had just been heavily modified. Julian was stripped of his immediate inheritance allowances, and a strict, ironclad financial barrier was placed around the family fortune. Daphne had spent years calculating this marriage, dreaming of instant, unlimited wealth, lavish shopping sprees, and a life of unchecked luxury. But with a few short sentences, the king turned her dream into a hollow cage. She was left with the royal title she so desperately craved, but absolutely none of the money that came with it. She and Julian would now have to live on a modest, strictly monitored monthly stipend, fully accountable to the crown for every single penny they spent. Right there in the middle of the reception hall, King Frederick presented me with a prestigious royal commendation for my military service and bravery. Daphne, trembling with humiliation and desperate to save whatever little standing she had left in the palace, was forced to swallow her pride, step forward, and publicly apologize to me in front of everyone. Looking at her, I realized that staying true to my hard, honest work had paid off far more than her lifetime of superficial greed ever could. I walked out of that palace with my head held high, my overalls still covered in grease, but carrying a legacy that money could never buy. Now, I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Would you have accepted Daphne's apology, or would you have walked away cleanly like I did? Comment your thoughts below. Meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.